Today, we would like to start with the AprilTag. The good thing is that it actually satisfies all the to-do we want. The first part is that the code is available and it's even in our Ducky-town. Second, it's in top conferences. There are actually 2 papers. The first generation AprilTag. There is another updates, AprilTag 2. If you read a paper like 30 years ago, unless it's a classic paper. So otherwise, maybe you want to read something new. And people care if you use the Google Scholar. So that's very convenient for you guys. 10 years ago, we don't have good Google Scholar yet. When you see a great number of citations for this paper, so it's typically pretty good. And the good thing is that if you have a cell phone, you can just download the app of the AprilTag. I think it's only in iPhone, so maybe Android users, sorry about that. But if you have an iPhone, you could just try to install the app and try to run it, and maybe scan just this. That's a very interesting thing. I really like you guys if you can install the application, and I always ask students try to break their algorithm in some way. So that would be that, okay, you have a running application in your hand and you can think about how to tackle, how to attack this algorithm. When you select a paper, try to check each one. Not all 5 papers, but maybe at least 1 paper. You can play with it. Okay. And the other reason to choose this paper is that many people use AprilTag. People care about it. Okay, so there are lots of applications. This is one of the applications that's from famous Boston Dynamics. That's the very frontier robotic company. And you can see that AprilTag has been placed on the door or on the box or something, so that the robot atlas try to locate a door or try to locate an object very easily. And the other example is the DRAPA Robotics Challenge. So you can see that atlas try to drive the vehicle, and there is an AprilTag there. Many difficult tasks are fairly easy. And there are some other research try to use AprilTag to do something very, very interesting. So even cross-discipline, not necessarily for a robot. And you can see that this is an ant, right? And you see 2 of the very tiny AprilTags on the ant. They try to place the tiny AprilTag on those over 41 days. And actually, I don't know the exact number of AprilTag has been placed on the. They try to use AprilTag to observe 9 million interactions among the ants. And then they find something very interesting. So the paper was published in Science. Yeah, another great motivation for AprilTag is the virtual reality or augmented reality. Because the AprilTag, they are very, very robust and very cheap. You just need to print them and place them around in the room. So you don't need to buy a very expensive Vicon or other motion tracking. And the other good things about AprilTag is that the AprilTag can provide the relative transformations from the camera to an AprilTag to an object, for example. So that's very extremely important for robotics or VR, AR applications. Okay, so today we will dig into the AprilTag. We will actually dig into the code. We actually print some handouts. Yeah, we will try to dig into the code and try to see what's going on in the code. So I guess this is probably very different from some other courses that you learn Gaussian smoothing, and you learn how to compute gradients, and you learn what's connected components. You learn how to do line fitting. In this class, because many of you already took image processing or computer vision courses already. So I guess those won't be too hard for you guys. Yeah, especially that you already have Jupyter Notebook with OpenCV. Most of the function, you can just hold the function and you can interact. The first part is to detect a potential location of an AprilTag. And here, the AprilTag algorithm uses a detector called a quad detector. So essentially, the AprilTag want to detect not really just the rectangles, but also you see the AprilTag in different perspectives. So there are some perspective transform, but you still get like 1, 2, 3, 4, right? So you can still get a quad. And the quad will also give you the information about the perspective transform or the relative transformation and rotation. And second part of the AprilTag is to decode. So that's the very typical object detection or pipeline. So you have a detector and you try to find region proposals. You find all possible locations. So the first part is essentially the where problem. So you find where is the potential object you want to detect. The second step is to verify it. Is this an AprilTag? Is this an AprilTag? This is also a very typical object detection pipeline. The third part is to obtain the transformation matrix, because this part will be closely related to virtual reality. So we will cover this part, the transformations, the pulse, rotations, etc. next time. Okay, and today we will just talk about the detector and the decoder. And actually the code is also in the Decoding repo. You can also, maybe you want to read it on the screen. So we will try to go over the AprilTag detector, the steps first. In each step, I try to come up with some questions. You already know that there is an AprilTag 2 because maybe some of the design is not so great. Maybe the computation is too heavy, maybe on the Raspberry Pi 2. So there are some other considerations. The design of the AprilTag, the tag families. So you can see the first one, the 1, 2, 3, 4 on the left-hand side. That's called tag 36H11. In the middle, tag 25H9. And the last part, tag 16H5. Let me explain the numbers first. So it's kind of obvious that 36 is the 6 by 6. In width and height, you have 6 blocks there, cells. Here, 5 by 5 and 4 by 4. And the H means the Hamming distance. Suppose we have two sequences, same length, right? For example, the top left, the first tag and the second one. If you put all the 36 cells in a row, and for the second tag, you put 36 in a row, and you try to find, this is black, okay, that's good. Black, white, so you could get how similar those two tags are. So that's pretty much about the Hamming distance. And the design of the Hamming distance is that we wish the tags, they could be different from each other. Even that some of them are occluded, you can still recognize it. So we can think about number of tags. So for example, for tag 16H5, you can imagine that the possibilities, the total number of tags could be much lower than tag 36H11 family. But the good things about the tag 16 family is that you may get a bigger cell in a given observation, right? So that could make things a little bit easier. Yeah, especially that if you have very tiny AprilTag, you want to put it in a tiny animal. Maybe this will also help. So this is the question you always want to ask yourself. Now there is an AprilTag algorithm, and how are we going to attack the algorithm, try to fail them? Let's get started with the first step, okay? So the first step is about pre-processing. Step 1, pre-process image, convert to grayscale, and low pass if necessary. Also see the comments. The pre-processing try to smooth, try to get rid of some noise. The Gaussian smoothing kernel. Are you guys familiar with the Gaussian smoothing kernel? Or the basic try to compute like convolution stuff. So essentially you have 9 by 9 or maybe 5 by 5, okay, a window for example, and you try to slide it over the entire image, okay, and try to average it somehow in a specific weights, okay, so that if you have some salt and pepper noise, you could get rid of them. Okay, and you also want to ask yourself, so now you are using the Gaussian smoothing, then what if you increase or decrease the sigma? Something you need to consider. What if I try to smooth the image too much? What's the worst case that could happen? Okay, for example. You also want to consider different environments. So maybe under sunlight or maybe in night vision. So you may want to change the parameters, tweak them a little bit, so that you will get a more blurry image and maybe less noise. How about the second one, night vision? So what if there is an AprilTag placed in dark? What may happen? Well, I think like, as I know, usually a camera, if the light condition is pretty poor, there might be some artifact. So those artifacts could be removed by the Gaussian smoothing. But maybe some typical case to deal with night vision is that because you still want to find a clear black and white, you want to find the segments, right? So some typical case is to do like enhancement. So it's like opposite of the smoothing, okay? So there is like a low pass filter and high pass filter. Right, and sometimes used under the night vision, you may be able to use a different filter to do enhancement instead of smoothing. I think you are right that some artifact could show up, especially in the night vision. Actually, this question will link to the next step. That would be like an algorithm design. Then the second one, and the second step is the local gradient. In fact, the algorithm tries to compute and keep both magnitude and directions. How many of you learned about, took the image processing or computer vision? Yeah, if you don't have the experience, don't worry about that too much. We have the OCW, and you could also quickly go over this with the classmates. If we compare the output between the Canon edge detector and local gradients, what's the difference here? It's actually in a Canon detector, it tried to quantify it already. So actually in the AprilTag detector, the algorithm intentionally keep the direction and the magnitude. But for Canon, the final output is just the edge pixels. Maybe some important information has been lost if you use Canon. For the second part, you may know that computing the gradient is usually the most computational expensive part. Typically you use a Sobel filter, maybe horizontal, and try to slide the kernel around the image. And you could see, for example, from black to white or white to black, you will see a gradient, the right-hand side. You can imagine a landscape, for example. If you have from 0 to 255, for example. The local gradients, essentially in this algorithm, it tries to keep both directions and magnitude. If you have a very steep from black to white, it may look something like this, right? And if you have some like blurry one, it will look like this. Computational cost, maybe some way to speed up. You can parallelize it pretty much because like the test is kind of independent, and then this is exactly what GPU can do. So anything like convolution, GPU could help you a lot. AprilTag 2, it tried to do like adaptive thresholding. That's AprilTag 2. Yeah, so I will encourage you to maybe add AprilTag 2 to one of your 5 papers, maybe. Okay, so that's a great way. And then to reduce some computation, AprilTag 2 also consider a window. So whenever the window has a less, maybe edge density, so it will just skip that part. I will also want to suggest one thing. Sometimes if you compute the integral image, so that could be another great way to speed up some repeated computation. Common steps for other feature detection. The question is that, do you know any other maybe feature detector that also compute gradient? Actually, one of the cited paper is a SIFT. So actually SIFT also compute the gradient. I think the citation is more than 30,000. So that's pretty high by David Lowe. Okay. Why keep both direction and magnitude? And you can see it also in the code, right? So the data type in float image, maybe we just use 1 byte per pixel, right? For example, from 0 to 255, right? That's just 1 byte. But for float image, 1 pixel will require maybe 4. So what do you think that why would we want to keep both direction and magnitude? Why not just, for example, do canning and just get the pixels? If you jump to step 6, there is a figure notches. You can actually see some very small line segments there, right? Here and here. The AprilTag algorithm intentionally to keep the direction so that in the later step, it could help with the chain of the segment. If you have an AprilTag there, and if you see the 2011 paper, they actually intentionally put a pencil on the edge of the AprilTag because the original design is to be robust to some occlusion. When you put a pencil on the edge, the segment will be broken into 2. If you keep both direction and the magnitude, it can actually recover it from the clustering. According to the gradient direction and magnitude, so the AprilTag can get the edges of the boundaries. About the memory part, so keep in mind that in some cases, especially for hardware implementation, the memory usually a bottleneck if you design something on hardware. So if you can come up with a good algorithm, use maybe relatively small memory, achieve the same thing. So that would be very good for hardware design as well. Maybe someday in the future, there might be a hardware implementation of the AprilTag. But by that time, maybe we should not use the float image because that will take lots of memories. The AprilTag also try to not just get the edge pixels, but also want to separate them. For example, the output of this step is, the desired output is that each edge for the quad could be separated. Fitting segments is something similar to the ducky tongue a little bit. So try to fit the lines with least square method. Maybe compare ducky tongue and here. Here we use the least square to find the line segment. You can see a function in there. It's called G line segment 2D, LSQ. That's the least square. Fit X, Y, and W. And you just put a few points and then do the least square line fitting. So compared to this method between this and the ducky tongue. So do you remember that what's the difference here? Actually, in ducky tongue and here, both algorithms try to fit lines, try to find the line segments. Yeah, but they use actually different ways to do it. And here is the least square. So maybe a few iterations and get the minimum errors from the line to each point. For ducky tongue, do you remember what method the ducky tongue repo for the line segments. If you take a look at the OCW, and the basic idea of the Hopf transform is that you transform the coordinates. For example, those points, they are looks on the same line, and you could transform this maybe in one angle and the radius. You will draw something like this and fit and try to vote a point. And that point can come back as a line. Okay, so just try to remind you about the Hopf transform. That's great that we have lots of comparison between the AprilTag and the line detector in Ducky-Town. And you can see probably the color here. You can see that this is 1, 2, 3, 4, and they are clustered into different groups. And the good thing is that later on, you want to connect this one to this one, and then this one to this one. Okay, next, try to chain the segments. And actually, the gradient direction will become very important in this step. For example, white and black, white and black, white and black, and white and black. Right, so that you can try to have a 4 segment to circle, to enclose this region. You could see that there is a very tiny notch here or here. Okay, that's the direction of the segment. And if you try to run the Ducky-Town code, the yellow or the white segments, you actually see point to 2 directions. Next step, connect 4 segments. So this is a little bit a search. Try to find, this is the starting of this segment, and this is the end of the segment. And you want to search which one the starting of the segment is close to the end of this segment. Yeah, some more discussion will come up if you have different shapes. If you have a triangle, do use it in the same way. Or if you have a cross there, you will have 12. Then that's probably good or not good. So those are the discussion we will try to see. You guys already know that the algorithm try to find all the segments and try to find the endpoint of one segment should be close to the starting point of the other segments. This is the competition in the Robotics in Singapore, 2015. They look fairly simple, right? But maybe not so much. So what do you think? If we do the chain segments, what may happen? Let's compare to circle and triangle. If we do the chain segments, this kind of algorithm on circle and triangle here, which one may be more useful than others? Maybe triangle a little bit more useful to use the chain segments. And the reason is that depending on the curvature, right? And the line, the least square may find a different number of lines every time. It will be pretty hard to determine like how many segments there. There is the biggest issue here on the right-hand side, the cross. When I face this problem during the competition, I want to come up with something robust. But when I try to do chain segments on those, so how many segments on those on this cross here? 12, right? If you look into the code, you will find that when you find all the segments, there might be 200 or 400. And then if you try to connect them, try to do a search, we want to find the endpoint of this segment close to the starting point of this segment, right? So if you have 200 segments, that's probably manageable. If you just have 4 segments, or maybe 3 segments, triangle should be manageable. But you can think that the search could be a tree getting down. And for triangle, you can just cut it. You just end the search at the 3rd level. And you cut it for quad at the 4th level. But if you dig into 12 levels, it will become like a pretty long time to solve. So have you guys learned about the computational complexity? So n is the number of segments, right? So if we deeper to one level, it's not just a square, I think. I think 2 level is a square, right? If you have just one level, suppose we have 200 segments, and the first node need to search the other 199. And then the second node, it also need to search the other 199. And so on, 199, 199. And that will kind of blow up the algorithm. Even a powerful laptop cannot solve. Decoding, when we have the quad, next step, we want to try to compute the Hamming distance. Maybe we can just work on this discussion altogether. So how many quads in this image? Anything with 4 segments. How many here? This one is fairly simple, right? Yeah, and then we also get the perspective transform so that we can place the dots aligned with the black and white. And how about here? This could be 1, right? And this could be 1, right? And maybe this one. Okay, actually multiple quads detected. So now you get multiple quads. That's the region proposals. And you need to check each one. Is this one belong to AprilTag number maybe 100 or number 8, etc. Okay, how about that? Some other questions we can talk together. So some of them we already covered this, right? We actually covered that if we have a blurry or maybe low resolution, what will happen? Maybe for blurry or low contrast in night vision, we can do some enhancements. How about low resolution? What can we do? Suppose you want to place a tiny AprilTag on a tiny animal, and maybe your camera is not a very high resolution camera. So what can we do? What if, for example, the ducky tongue camera, that's a fisheye camera, right? What do you think? This kind of lens distortion make the detector worse? What do you think? In ducky tongue, we usually have one rectification procedure. So if we get the intrinsic parameters, we can just rectify so that we can get a straight line of the segments. How about occlusion? What if I block this? Will I still get the AprilTag detection here? Suppose we just cut a very small corner out of the tag, depending on like how far or how much you keep the corner, right? So if you actually cut it pretty deep, the algorithm will still try to do the chain segments and do like maybe 1, 2, 3, 4 and stop, right? And probably the distance is maybe too far so that it won't consider that as a quad. Yeah, so that's maybe one reason. But it's also possible that after the smoothing, if the distance is close enough, it could still work. Yeah. The third one is an interesting question. This is running a little bit long, but I think this is very exciting. For example, you print the April and you cut it like this. And then will this make the detector more effective or not? Suppose you print the AprilTag, right? Like on A4 page, and you cut it here, and you place it in one environment. So actually, some of us tried that before, right? So remember, if you print an AprilTag and you cut it, try to leave some white surroundings for it. Last question, what if we invert black and white? Something like this. Can we still make it work somehow?
This one become white and this one should become black.
Ah, okay.
Maybe it will work.
I see. You mean like invert?
Yes.
Okay. But you still got the edges and segments. The only difference is that the notch will become this. Okay, so that's one way. You know that people try to make a non-salient AprilTag, because if we place this in the environment, then people will feel pretty weird about it, right? And sometimes if you put this maybe in a train station, and you will think that, wow, it's an art. What if we want to design an AprilTag detector that could detect this? And how are we going to do it? So Yuri mentioned one thing, that maybe invert the direction. That may work, yeah? So maybe one way is to have a sliding window. You could like put lots of region proposals and try to get a quad like this. But that will be much more computational, expensive, and also your region proposal should have different perspectives. That would be pretty hard to get this right. Well, we have been using AprilTag as a ground truth so that it could, for example, give you the right region of interest. For example, Mao Zedong Road. Yeah, that's the name of our president. So maybe he will fund us somehow, right? And also maybe if you want to generate a cube for different objects, then that's probably also a good way to ground truth for those things.